Registrations are now open for our ACCA Performance Management exam course. Get access to our comprehensive playlist of over 46 hours of content, including concept videos covering the entire syllabus, exam videos explaining how those concepts are tested in the exam, and question videos to help you with exam practice. Subscribe to one of our packages. The smallest package, for $10, you get access to the entire course for 7 days, or you can subscribe to one of our longer term packages. For more information, check out the links in the description below. And now, on to the video. Hello everyone. So, today we're going to be doing another ACCA past paper question. And the topic we've picked for today is relevant costing. So this question, HLCO, is from the December 2014 past paper. It's in section B, it's question number 3. And it's for 10 marks. Now do keep in mind this paper is from before September 2016. So it has an older format than the current paper does. So instead of section C being the written questions, section B was the written questions. And instead of the questions being for 20 marks, they can be for 10 to 15 marks here. So this one is just for 10 marks. Meaning from an exam timing standpoint, we have 1.8 minutes per mark. You should approximately take 18 minutes to do such a question, though you might take a few minutes more here or there. So, when it comes to relevant costing questions, section C is not a popular area for them to test them. So, written questions don't usually relate to relevant costing. It's much more popular in the MCQs, especially section B, where you could have a full set of 5 MCQ questions on it, where the same scenarios that you will see in these questions would be split into 5 different MCQs. That being said, it's not impossible for these to come as a written question, so we'll cover this and how to format our answer here, right? With relevant costing questions, the good thing is they're very straightforward, right? So as always, we start with the requirement of the question. Ignore all of this. Requirement: prepare on a relevant cost basis the lowest cost estimate which could be used as the basis for the quotation. Explain briefly your reasons for including or excluding each of the costs in your estimate. So this is a typical section C relevant costing question. This will usually be the requirement that we need to prepare a quotation based on all this data for using the relevant costing principles. We need to give justifications for including or excluding any costs, and then we need to show our total cost. So there's a certain format we must follow, and there's a certain way in which we must answer the question. So to answer the question, we'll need to prepare a cost estimate sheet. As always, when we start, we need to start by labeling our question. So question 3, always put a label, ideally make it bold, underline, something like that, so that it's distinguished from the rest of the answer. And let's keep that column blank for the rest. Now, in our cost estimate sheet, we'll have a description of the cost. We'll have the actual value of the cost itself. Now, as for the explanation, because relevant costing questions in section C is not just about determining the relevant cost, but always giving an explanation for it. Either you could put an explanation right next to each cost, or you could put a reference next to the cost, and then down below next to those references, you can answer with the explanation. So we'll do that technique. So we'll have a column for references, and I'll show you how that works. For description, let's just extend the column a bit. Okay. And again, with headings for anything, for any sheet, any table, you should distinguish them. So let's make them bold and underline. Yeah. Okay. So we've been given all this data. With relevant costing question, you don't need to focus on the table. Okay. The focus should be on the notes themselves, and each note should be treated as an independent thing, as in that means when you're reading note 3, you should not be worried about what happened in notes 1 and 2. Each note is independent. Read through the note to determine the relevant cost. Only look at the table if there's any information missing from the note that you need to refer to the table to. Otherwise, there'll be certain notes you don't even need to refer to the table to be able to determine the relevant cost. Okay. So just for a quick briefing, let's look at the description up below. It says High Life Co. makes sofas. It has recently received a request from a customer to provide a one-off order of sofas in excess of normal budgeted production, blah, blah, blah. Complete the order in 2 weeks. The following estimate has been made, right? It's all fluff, okay? So this is the important part. So let's start with the notes. So it says note 1, the fabric is regularly used by HLCO. I'm assuming the fabric to make the sofas. There are currently 300 meters squared in inventory, which costs $17 per meter squared. Let's stop here. With relevant costing, always go sentence by sentence and based on that information determine what the relevant cost is. So we have a fabric which is regularly used, meaning it has an alternative use. Whenever there's an alternative use, there's a replacement cost, okay? So we also have it currently in inventory. So the 300 meters squared in inventory have an alternative use which cost $17 per meter squared. Cost as in it happened in the past. We already have it in inventory. So this $17 per meter squared is irrelevant. It's sunk cost because it happened in the past. The current purchase price of the fabric is $17.5 per meter squared. Okay. So what do we need to do here? But first of all, we don't know how much of the fabric we need. So that information isn't given here. We go to the table. The table says fabric 200 meters squared are needed. Okay, ignore this, that's not relevant. We just need the information that's relevant for us from the table above. So description, we'll talk about the first description. We can say cost 1, and this relates to the fabric, right? That's the sufficient description. Now what will the relevant cost be? We need 200 meters. We have 300 meters in inventory. It's already in inventory, but it's being regularly used. So it has an alternative use. So we don't need to buy it, but we do need to incur a replacement cost since there's an alternative use. And the replacement cost is always based on the current market value, which is $17.5, right? So is equal to 200 meters needed multiplied by 17.5. That gives us $3,500, okay? And let's give a reference here. So this is working 1, W1, okay? And down below, we can have our references. So we can say W1 over here. Again, let's give it a heading. And then let's describe what's happening here. So we'll say we have the fabric already in inventory. 300 meters, let's just mention that. Out of which we need only 200 meters. Yeah, I think it's gone off the screen a bit. Let me just pull the Excel sheet a bit. Okay. Now, just a regular note before we carry on with the explanation. What students struggle with sometimes is formatting the answer in a spreadsheet. So because there's no merge and center option in the spreadsheet software that ACCA gives. So don't write a long sentence, overly long sentence, right? Instead, break it up into smaller sentences and move down to the next row so that it's easy to follow and it looks kind of like a paragraph, right? The inventory already has an alternative use. Use buzzwords like that. So it needs to be replaced. Oops, replaced. And replacement cost is based on the current market price of $17.5 per meter. Yeah. So we have our explanation here. That's sufficient. So you'll get a mark for the cost and a mark for the explanation as well. Let's move on. Next, we have the second paragraph. So cost 2, and it seems to be talking about wood. So we'll just write wood here. Okay. So this type of wood is regularly used by HLCO and usually costs $8.2 per meter. Okay. However, the company's current supplier's earliest delivery time for the wood is in 3 weeks' time. Now, notice the project needed to be completed in 2 weeks up here, right? So we only have, they'll deliver this at 3 weeks if we get it by the regular supplier. An alternative supplier could deliver immediately, but they would charge a higher price of $8.5 per meter squared. We already have 500 meters in inventory, but 480 of this is needed to complete other existing orders in the next 2 weeks. The remaining 20 is not going to be needed until 4 weeks' time. So we have quite a situation on our hands. So let's say working 2, let's put the explanation as we determine the relevant cost. And we'll put the reference here as well, working 2. Okay, so what's the story here? We need, how much do we need? It's not mentioned here. We need 50 meters, right? We need 50 meters of wood. In the inventory, we have 500, but out of that, 480 is needed. It's occupied. 20 is not needed, okay? We have 20 meters which we can use, and it's not needed until 4 weeks time, so we can order it from the regular supplier who delivers in 3 weeks time at $8.2 per meter, right? So we have 20 meters which we can use and replace at a cost of $8.2 per meter, right? But what about the remaining 30? The remaining 30 we'll have to take from these 480 meters, right? And the issue is that they had to be used for within 2 weeks. On existing orders, there's a replacement cost again. However, since it's within 2 weeks, we'll have to order them from the alternative supplier who would charge a higher price of $8.5 per meter. So we'll write that down. For the remaining 30 meters, we would need to order from the other supplier. This will cost us $8.5 per meter, okay? And again, all wood would need to be replaced due to its alternative use, right? Just reinforce that. Okay, so we've given our explanation. Let's put the calculation. So 20 meters of wood would be bought at the regular $8.2 per meter, plus 30 meters of wood would be bought at $8.5 per meter. Again, I've been saying this point over and over again in other videos as well. If you're given a spreadsheet, you should not be touching your calculator. So you don't do any calculation manually. Everything must be done in the spreadsheet. Okay, if you're touching your calculator, you're doing something wrong. So $419. Okay, next, let's move on to cost 3, and this seems to deal with skilled labor. So that seems to be a recurring theme. Usually you'll have the first few costs relating to different types of materials, then a cost for skilled labor, then for semi-skilled labor, and then for any other costs. Okay, so working 3, and let's put a label down below. Working 3. Okay, so what do we have? The skilled labor force is employed under permanent contracts of employment under which they must be paid 40 hours per week's labor, even if their time is idle due to the absence of orders. Okay, fair enough. The rate of pay is $16 per hour, although any overtime is paid at time and a half. Okay. In the next 2 weeks, there is spare capacity of 150 labor hours. Okay, so they haven't told us how many hours we need. We need, if we go up to the table, 200 hours. Okay. And let's start. So first of all, whenever we have labor, the first thing we need to consider is do we have the labor employed? Yes, we have them employed. Next thing we consider is, do they have any spare capacity or idle time? And they mentioned in the last sentence there's spare capacity of 150 labor hours. So out of the 200 labor hours, the first thing we'll take is the 150 spare capacity. And spare capacity means there's no relevant cost, right? They were going to be paid anyway, even if we didn't take the project, there's no relevant cost here. So we'll write that point down first. There are 150 hours of spare capacity for which there is no relevant cost. Okay, but we have 200 hours needed in total. We still need 50 hours. After spare capacity, before we think of hiring or replacing the existing workers, we look if overtime is possible. And they've said that yes, overtime is possible. And the rate of pay is $16 per hour, but overtime is at time and a half, so a 50% premium, right? So the remaining 50 hours will be worked as overtime, which is paid at a premium of 50%. Yeah. Okay. So let's do our calculation. 150 hours is no cost. We don't need to mention that. 50 into so what's the rate of pay? 16 into time 1.5, and that gives us 24, I believe. So 50 into 24 gives us 1,200. Okay. Let's move on to cost number 4. Now in the fourth paragraph, seems we're dealing with semi-skilled workers. Yeah. So semi-skilled labor. Okay. Let's just extend this a bit. Right. Now, what do they say? There is no spare capacity for semi-skilled workers right off the bat. So we don't have any spare capacity, okay? They are currently paid at $12 per hour or time and a half for overtime. However, a local agency can provide additional semi-skilled workers for $14 per hour. So this is a special type of relevant costing question. The twist is we have options in this. Either we can pay our existing workers overtime, or we can hire from the local agency. Okay, whenever there's options given, we need to weigh the two options against each other and see which one is better for the company. Okay, let's shift this a bit up because it seems we only have 6 relevant costs anyway. We have space, so let's shift this up a bit, and that's the beauty of having a computer-based exam, right? Copy, paste, etc. to restructure our answer. We don't need to erase or anything, right? So please always do that. Okay. So let's weigh the two options. First of all, they haven't told us how many hours we need. Let's go back up. Semi-skilled workers, 300 hours, right? Okay, so 300 hours. One option is that they are currently paid $12 or time and a half for overtime. So we'll mention we have two options. Either we pay them overtime of $12 times time and a half, so that's $18. $18, we can show the calculation in brackets here. $12 times 1.5 per hour, or we can hire them from a local agency. As mentioned, we have two options for semi-skilled workers, right? For, again, we can just go back and edit our answer. Semi-skilled labor. Here's either we can pay them overtime at $18 per hour, or we can hire them from a local agency at $14 per hour. So what's the better option? Clearly, it's paying $14 per hour rather than $18 per hour. And we need to hire them for 300 hours as we saw. So go back up to our table, working number 4. And we have 300 into 14, okay, 4,200. Let's just give a conclusion here as well. The better option is to hire from the local agency, or rather than saying better, let's be more specific. The cheaper option, that's why it's better, right? The cheaper option is to hire from the local agency. This will be for a total of 300 hours, right? We don't need to go into too much detail in the explanation. Get to the point, but make all the relevant points that you thought of when writing down your answer, so that the marker can easily follow your train of thought. Okay, right. Cost number 5. What do we have now? Okay, we have factory overheads. It seems factory overhead, absorption rate, etc. So let's write factory overheads. Now, when it comes to factory overheads, general overheads, we know the theme. Don't be intimidated or confused by absorption rate, apportionment, any of that stuff. When it comes to these sorts of overheads, whether it be factory or general, whatever name they say, fixed costs, we only need to look for one thing. Are they general or are they specific to the project? If they're general overheads, they're never relevant. If they're specific to the project, then they're relevant. Okay, so that's what we're looking at. So ignore absorption rate and all of this nonsense, right? That's not our concern. Okay, so absorption rate is $3, $1.5 per hour, reflects the cost of the factory supervisor salary, other 1.5. All of this is nonsense, just there to confuse you, okay? We need to look at any specific cost for the project. Now, it says the supervisor is paid an annual salary and is also paid $15 per hour for any overtime he works. He will need to work 20 hours of overtime if this order is accepted. So out of all of this, the last sentence is what we're interested in. It tells us the specific cost, that he needs to work 20 hours of overtime for this order. So we don't need to worry about the overheads otherwise, okay? And he's paid at $15 per hour for any overtime that he works. So this is going to be working 5. Okay, once again, we just need to explain our logic for including or excluding any costs. Working 5. So we'll start by talking about the factory overheads. The factory overheads are not related to the project, or rather, a better word to use here is not incremental, right? Because that's the buzzword we use. Incremental to the project. So they are not relevant, right? Simple as that. The only specific cost related to the project is the overtime paid to the supervisor, right? This will be for 20 hours at a rate of $15 per hour. So we've given our train of thought and our explanation. So mark for that explanation, and we get a mark for the number itself, the relevant cost. So 15 into 20 gives us 300. Okay, let's move on to the last one. Just one sentence. It says this is an apportionment of the general administrative overheads incurred by ACCA. So it relates to the previous one. So we can simply write another sentence again. General administrative overheads, right? General gives it away. It's not relevant. The general overheads are not relevant either, as they are not specific or incremental to the project or order. Let's say, well, we've been using project, so let's stay consistent. Okay, so we have our workings and we have all our costs. Now what do we need to do? We need to give a total at the bottom. So we sum these up, right? We get 9619 and make it bold, right? So that it's separate and distinguished from everything else, because that's what the marker is going to look for first. What was your total? So you can compare that to the market scheme. Make his life easier and he'll want to give you more marks as well, right? Now, technically we're done. We've given our whole cost estimate and we've given our reasoning for including or excluding costs. One last thing that I would recommend is that we give a small conclusion, right? Just for presentation purposes, so that it looks nice. Conclusion, what would we say? Simply put, remember, we're looking at the relevant cost of the minimum cost, that the lowest cost estimate that should be charged for the order. And based on relevant costing, that should be 9619. That would give us break even. Ideally, we would want to charge a bit more to make a profit. So let's give that conclusion. The lowest cost estimate should be $9619 for the order. Yeah, right? Ideally, we should charge more than that to make a profit, right? So now we have everything. Nice presented cost card with the references given for the explanations, with the numbers all given, and references to the numbers as well to the paragraphs back in the answer. Furthermore, we have a nice conclusion summing it all up, and we give our explanations in small bit-sized pieces which are easy to follow and understand. So that's how you answer a relevant costing section C question. Have your cost estimate table above, give your references or give your explanations right next to it. I would recommend, given that you saw our explanations ran a bit long, keep them separately below with this sort of scheme, that you have W1, W2 and down below the same reference points, right? And ideally for presentation purposes, give a conclusion as well. Remember, the mistakes that students make is they're usually overly focused on getting the relevant cost numbers in, but they don't give the explanations, and half the marks are for the explanations. So you need to give those as well, right? Otherwise, there's no point. And they're not really that complicated, right? It's simple and straightforward. Be to the point, but make all the relevant points there as well. Okay? So we'll stop here. I hope you benefited from this video.